Here we go. Okay, so we're going to do some square roots today and completing the square. Just as a warm-up, let's solve some of the most basic equations that I can think of that involve some square roots. So we're going to solve each one. First one, what are we going to do? Square root both sides. Got to isolate the x squared variable. That's been done for us. Don't forget the plus or minus. That's a big one. Right, because you are solving for x-intercepts when you do this, right? So if you forget the plus or minus, you're going to be missing one of them, okay? This one here, need to isolate the x squared variable, so need to get rid of the 5. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. 14 minus 5 is 9. Now we can square root both sides. What have I forgotten? Yeah, plus or minus, right? Because negative 3 times negative 3 is 9, and so is positive 3 and positive 3. So now we start caring about the principal and non-principal square roots. Right? The principal square root is the positive one, the negative one is the not principal one. This one, need to isolate the x squared variable, so it's a two-stepper. Add 8 to both sides. And now what? Divide by 2. Good, you guys are so smart.
Thank you.
I basically don't even have to teach. So now you have x squared equals 12. Well, if it's not a perfect square, that's fine. You'll still square root both sides. And then the good news is you don't even need to reduce. You just write plus or minus square root 12. We could reduce, but we really don't care. This would be a question where you'd have your calculator. You'd be able to get what that is as a decimal. And I'll never make you graph one with a weird decimal, unless it's like a 0.5 or something. Just for simplicity. Yeah, we're not worried about that. Ooh, what about this one? That's a binomial. So should we FOIL it out? Some of you shook your head no. What would be? You could FOIL it out. You'd be making more work for yourself. Could I just, because it's a binomial, it's isolated, could I just square root both sides? Yeah, you sure could. And if you weren't sure about that, now you know. If you could just square root both sides, what would I get out of that square root then? Very good. So you get x minus 1 equals plus or minus square root 5. Sometimes you get a nice number here. In this case, we didn't. Now, I'm going to add 1 to both sides to solve for x. So I get x equals 1 plus or minus square root 5. And just to be clear, like what that plus or minus means is it means one of my x-intercepts is 1 plus square root 5, whatever that is. The other one is 1 minus square root 5. So that's what the plus or minus means. You can just take a shortcut and write this instead of writing 2 of those, okay? You guys feel good about that?
So you don't have to write the one in front of
No, you can just leave it here. It's understood that that's what it means. I just wanted to make sure you guys are aware of that.
You don't have to write the 1.
No, you need to write the 1. So I thought you don't need to write these 2 things. You can just write this. Yeah, I thought that's what you meant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Everyone looks good? Okay. Try the next slide. So, some of these equations, like when we're completing the square, as I said, we're going to solve some square root equations. We're going to do this thing called completing the square. When you complete the square, you're going to get a lot of stuff that looks like this when you're solving for x. So you will be doing the square root to a lot of binomials that are squared. Okay? So that's why I chose that particular one. Done. Alright, maybe add the title in blue if you don't already have that. I'll just erase the board. I gotta start getting on their case about getting that projector installed. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. Sorry, it looks like that. Should be the next page, example 1. Yeah. Everyone proud of it? Halt. Yeah, you tell them.
Squinting because it's just like reflecting on you, like it's just.
Yeah. Do I look really like pale? Or
scared. Dude wasn't telling me the story.
Really? And then a bunch of snakes came. No, I can't tell. Last one. That's the last one. Yeah, that's like it's a really bright bulb. Don't look into the bulb. Okay, so solving quadratics with square roots. And I'm just saying, like, in general, these kinds of questions are going to be like, you know, ax squared plus c equals 0, or might equal a number or something like that. So if you look at your first one, that's exactly what we got. We already got a question like this on the review before. So we add 1 to both sides, isolate the x squared, so divide both sides by 2, and then square root both sides, so you get x is plus or minus square root 3, and you're done. I'm just going to grab this one down here and do it over here, because I got to go all the way over there and move the mouse. Okay, so we're going to square root both sides. And when you square root both sides, you got this. So the first step is square root both sides. Okay, that's going to give you x minus 4. So whatever's in here, because it's squared, it means there's 2 of these and you just get one of them out. And then plus or minus square root 12, which you don't need to reduce. And then add 4 to both sides, and you're done. And in general, if you have like a thing that has plus or minus, you put it last. So you go some number plus or minus square root 12. You're done. That's it. So that's easy. I think that's all the examples on that page. Let me just quickly check. Yeah? Okay. Let's look at completing the square. Okay? Now, I might change the example on us. Or actually, well, whatever. Here you go. So can't remember what your blank notes are going to have. Do you have like this? Do you have like all the steps written out already? No? Okay, so there'll be a bit of writing. I apologize for that. How dare I make you write? Alright, so sometimes equations cannot be solved with any regular factoring method. Perhaps you can't find 2 factors that multiply and add to the numbers you need them to. In this case, you can use something called completing the square. This particular one. Now, the one you have on your page might be different, but I'd like to do this example. Okay, so if you have a different one, let's do this one. I'm pretty certain you guys have a different one. I apologize, I'm sorry. I don't know how that happened. So you're going to change it to x squared plus 4x equals 3. So I would say, hey, factor that. So you rearrange it right away, you set it equal to 0. Okay? And then what happens? Well, I can't find 2 numbers that multiply to negative 3 but add to positive 4. Are there 2 such numbers? Integers? Yeah, you got 1 and 3, right? So you can make them multiply to positive 3 and add to 4, but you can't get negative 3 and add to 4, right? So that one we wouldn't be able to factor. Well, it turns out you can use this method called completing the square. That'll let you factor it. Your answer will probably have a square root in it. Okay, and that's why we were solving equations that had square roots. So how do you complete the square? Yeah, I bet. There you go. So we're going to do it for this particular one. So basically, you're gonna turn this into a perfect square. So the solution is, well, I can't do it, so we're going to turn it into a perfect square trinomial. And we'll have some left over too, like it's going to be a perfect square trinomial and some other stuff. So first, you want to set up the equation like this. It must be set up like that. Okay, must be, absolutely. And I want to point out that I purposely put a +1 there. If this is not +1, you got to make it +1. So you have to pull out whatever it is and move it to the other side. Okay, and we'll do questions like that. I just want to point out, write yourself a note and be like, must be +1. If it's not, our little completing the square does not work. Okay? So that's important. Then, step 2. And all we're doing, if you're wondering, like, where does this come from? We're working backwards to make it a perfect square trinomial. So we're going to look at the bx term right here. Okay, now you know that in the perfect square trinomial, this term is 2ab. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that coefficient, we're going to divide it by 2 and square it. We're going to take it, divide it by 2 and square it. So basically you're going to go b divided by 2 and you're going to square it. That's your second step. Now that's going to be what I call our magic number. Because in step 3, which I believe is the last step, you're going to add that magic number to both sides of the equation. And you should now have a perfect square trinomial that you can factor and solve. Like magic. It's a good party trick. Watch me take this unfactorable thing and make it factorable. It's a magic trick. Yeah, that's usually the reaction you get. These blank stares. And Mason eating his pencil. Delicious.
What was the example? It was.
What was number one?
Yeah.
So we'll go back. We're gonna do it for that example. I just want to make sure you guys have the steps. So what you should have is you'll have.
What was the step one?
Oh, what was it? Oh, what was the step one? Okay, not that. Okay. So right beside your steps, seeing as we scroll back up, right beside your steps, if you could then have this example getting solved, that would be really neat. Okay, so we're gonna take this thing. It's already like this. Step 2 is take that bx term, okay? Take the coefficient, so the 4 divided by 2 and square it. So I'll just call that k. Let's call that k. So our magic number, we're gonna take 4, we're gonna divide it by 2, and we're gonna square it. And we get, well, you get 2 squared, which is 4. Well, in this case, you get the same number. It happens. The last step is add that to both sides of the equation. Okay, so step 1, step 2, step 3 starts here. So I'm going to take this 4 and I'm going to go x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 3 plus 4. So I added that. Maybe circle it so it's clear. You added that to both sides. Now, hey, is that okay? Like, can I do that to an equation? Like, if I add 4 over here and I add 4 over here, is it still balanced? You betcha. So that's why you can do it. So we're not just arbitrarily doing stuff. It's like it's an equation. So as long as you do the same thing to both sides, you haven't changed the equation, right? It's like a balance, right? I added 4 pounds on this side, 4 pounds on that side, it still balances out. Yeah? Excellent. But now I'm saying, hey, this should be factorable. This should be a perfect square trinomial now, is it? Yes. If it is, your answer is just going to be x plus 2 squared. Now, where did the 2 come from? Equals 7. Now, this looks like one of the equations we were just solving a slide ago, doesn't it? Didn't we solve ones exactly like this? A binomial squared equals a number, yeah. So the answer is not pretty, right? It's not factorable, so you don't have like a nice integer answer. But now you can actually do it on paper. You don't need any special technology or anything. I sort of missed a step. If you go back here, I just want to point something out for step 2. I wanted to show the intermediate step. So like when you go 4 divided by 2, you get 2, then you square it, and then you get k equals 4. Okay? What I want to point out, and I'll do it in a different color. Whatever number you get here is the number that goes there. So when you go b divided by 2, that's the number that's going to end up going in that binomial every time. The other thing to watch out for is how do you know if this is a plus or minus? If this is a plus, that's a plus. If this were a minus, that would be a minus sign as well. And the good news is you would have a negative sign here too. Because if this was negative, I would have had negative 4 divided by 2. I would have gotten negative 2. So we just put a negative 2 here. Okay? So here's your 3-step process. After that, you just have to solve it. Right? So we can square root both sides. And we would get x plus 2 equals plus or minus square root 7. Right? Square root this, square root that. Don't forget the plus or minus. Subtract 2 from both sides. And you get x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 7, and you now have your x-intercepts. That's completing a square.
So gives the plus or minus, square root of 7. Does that mean like 0 plus square root of 7 and then 0 plus square root of 7? Does that
Like you mean like it just means that like right here I would go to this step. Right, and what this means is you got negative 2 plus square root 7. That's one of your x-intercepts. Okay. The other one is negative 2 subtract.
What if you don't have a number like negative 2 there?
Oh, like you just had plus or minus 7. Yeah. Then you would have the positive version and the negative version of the square root of 7.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's not subtracting or adding.
No. I mean, you said 0 plus or minus. That would be the same thing. But yeah, there's no need to have a 0. Yeah. If I was like to compare it to like one that we can do, like if I said plus or minus square root 9, right? Like what does it mean? It means I have plus 3 and negative 3. Yeah, the difference is this is like a decimal number. Yeah. Good. Now you guys don't have a lot of experience with plus or minus, do you? Like, Like it doesn't really come up until now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I can't remember grade 10. I don't think you ever really do it much in grade 10. Yeah, it's just a shorthand way to write two things at once, just plus or minus. Yeah. Okay, everybody feel good about completing the square? Everybody be cool if we never do another example again?
Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately we're gonna do that. And this is where remember I was telling you about that student teacher I had a few years ago where like she taught this unit and then like I said, we're gonna show you all these factoring methods. We're gonna get to the end of the unit and I'm gonna say you can also just use the quadratic equation. Which is that big square root one that I showed you. Yeah, and that can factor anything. So you don't even necessarily need to know completing the square. There is a quadratic equation that we're gonna go over where you have to complete the square to get there. So that's maybe one reason why we teach it, but yeah. Binomials, and we don't know what the k value is. Somebody was asking this question from the homework the other day. It was a harder version of it, but it's kind of the same question. It's like, what does this number need to be so this is a perfect square trinomial? So our algorithm for completing the square is take that b term, divide by 2, and square it, right? That's what k is. So in this one, is the one we just did. Right, 4 divided by 2 squared, so k would be 4. Do you agree? Excellent.
Is k always the value of the coefficient when you divide by 2 squared?
Yeah.
That's just what it's.
Yeah. Remember, this has to be plus 1. If it's not plus 1, you gotta pull out whatever it is. And we'll do an example of that. It'll come. Yeah. So this one right here, k, is take the 12, divide by 2, square it. Write the intermediate step. Here's why. I'll show you because we're gonna factor this one. So in this case, k is 36. Okay, so if this was a 36, this is now a perfect square trinomial. Let's factor it. So remember, I said all you gotta do is take this and put it in here and square it, and you're done. That's it. If you FOIL this out, you'll get that. Let's do it. You'll get x squared, and then you'll get 2 6x's, so you get a 12x, 6 times 6, 36. Done, right? Good. How about this one? Ooh, it's got a negative. So you go negative 10 divided by 2 squared. Write the intermediate step. Whoops. Write the intermediate step so you know what number to write in there. So it's negative 5 squared, which is 25. So k is 25. Now if you factor it, you go x. What do you think? What did I tell you?
Squared.
X minus 5 squared, yeah? Whatever that number is, that's what goes there.
On
Yeah.
the test, can you just literally do
Wait,
that?
so
Or do we
it's
have to
yeah.
show the word? Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Okay.
Is that the final answer, x minus 5 squared?
Yeah, well this question is just asking what value of k makes it a perfect square trinomial. I just started factoring them to make sure we're all comfortable writing, actually doing that, right? Last one. So it's negative 2. So you go your b value, negative 2 divided by 2 squared. Write the intermediate step. So what is negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1 squared. So k is positive 1. If I factor this, I just go x, whatever number is there, x minus 1 squared. If you don't believe me, FOIL it out. You'll get x squared minus 2x plus 1. Okay? Great. Cool. Never questioned it wrong. I'm TikTok famous. Yeah. Excuse me?
Can you get a drink of water?
Of course. Yeah. Next slide. You're behind because you were trying to find me on TikTok.
I already found you. You want to see my TikTok? Oh, wait.
No, I don't want to see your TikTok. I was thinking the other day, famous people I want to meet.
Little honey.
I also wanted to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah.
You know who Charlie D'Amelio is?
Who? No. Who else?
She owns.
I want to meet Neil Patrick Harris. That'd be cool. And, let's do this. So completing the square when a is equal to 1. So this is a question where the x squared term is already plus 1, the coefficient. So that's the a term. So we'll just do another one. There we go. So your first step is you need to set it up so that it looks like this. Ax squared plus bx equals c. And I guess I'll put the plus 1. It needs to be set up like that. So your constant term needs to go to the other side. This is the thing that's making it unfactorable, right? Like, what are two numbers that multiply to 3 and add to negative 10? Right? That's how you know you need to complete the square, right? I'm not gonna necessarily tell you to. Although I might, but I might not necessarily tell you, right? You just get a question that's like, oh, I can't factor that. So what are my options? I can complete the square. Or use the quadratic formula, which we haven't covered yet. Okay, so you set it up. Leave yourself some room, because you're gonna write something here, right? So set it up so it looks like this. Then go find k. So grab the b term, divide by 2, square it. Write the intermediate step where you have negative 5 squared, and now k is 25. So what are we going to do? We're going to add this to both sides. So we add it over here, and we add it over there. Now if I did everything right, this is a perfect square trinomial. You can check. Is that a perfect square? Yes. Is that a perfect square? Yes. And then is 2 times the square root of that times the square root of that negative 10. And if it is, it's a perfect square. It is, I guarantee you. It will be every time. So how do you factor it? Just grab whatever number was here in the intermediate step. So it's x minus 5 squared equals, and over here you're going to get 22. Okay, now it says solve this, so I haven't solved it yet, so I got to square root both sides. So they get x minus 5 equals plus or minus square root 22. Just hang on one second. And then add 5 to both sides. And you're done. Okay, you had a question?
So is that the shortcut? Just put the negative
Yeah.
or the b value?
Yeah. Not the b value, once you divided it by 2.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's a shortcut.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I'm just looking at the x negative 5.
Right here?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm just confused on how you got the negative 5. Because it says negative 10. positive
Yeah.
25.
So what we noticed when we were completing the square is that if we take, so when we find our k value, right, which is b divided by 2 squared, right, that's where we got the 25 from, right? Yeah. Because we were going to factor this. This is a perfect square trinomial. If you get the intermediate step, so that's the middle step of doing this number is always a number that goes there.
Okay.
It's just an observation. Yeah. Now, if you were to go, if you go FOIL this out, right, you get x times x, x squared, and then you get x times negative 5, so you get a negative 5x, and then you go this times this, you get another negative 5x. This times this gives you the 25. Right? So here's your negative 10x. There's your x squared, there's your 25. It works every time. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Why should we square root the 22?
Oh, because we square rooted both sides. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, where's my marker? Yeah, so we square rooted this side, we square rooted that side. Yeah. Excellent. I think you guys are ready to do what I believe is the harder version. Let's see, right away. Yeah, there it is. So completing the square when a does not equal 1. Aw, dang. Anybody know any grade 9 kids with spare? They can just
So that's a spare grade.
mop up the board.
You can't have a spare grade.
No?
Well,
I guess that makes
it's
sense.
pretty bad, but
They don't let you drop the class. You're not old enough. We simply multiply the equation by whatever number. Yeah, that's one way of doing it. You can multiply both sides by some number to make the a term equal to 1. You can pull it out like I was saying before. As long as you do the same thing to both sides of the equation, you're okay, right? Not plus 1. Now, two options. You can pull out the negative 0.5, or because it's an equation, you can multiply both sides by 2. Negative 2. I need positive 1 here. So whatever you do is you're going to look at this and you're going to multiply by the reciprocal, right? How do you get rid of a number? Multiply by its reciprocal. You always get 1. So if I go ahead and just multiply everything on this side by negative 2, and then everything on this side by negative 2, I'll have done the same thing to both sides of the equation, and I'll still have the same question. So multiply each term by negative 2. So negative 2 times negative 1/2 just gives me positive x squared. Negative 2 times positive 6 gives me negative 12x. Negative 2 times negative 1 gives me positive 2. 0 times negative 2 is still 0. Done. Now, can I factor this? Two numbers that multiply to 2 and add to negative 12? Nope. 1 and 2 are my only options. Never gonna get there. So we're gonna complete the square. So I just write CTS for complete the square. In order to complete the square, I need to move the C term over there. So 0 subtract 2 is negative 2. I'm going to find my k value that I'm going to add here to get a perfect square trinomial. So k is take your b term, divide by 2, square it. Write the intermediate step, so you get negative 6 squared, and you get k equals 36. So 36 is the magic number. Winner, winner, chicken dinner, 36. Come on down, you get a free car. Add 36 to both sides, right? The Price is Right is coming to Brandon, isn't it?
Is it?
Oh, it's coming on Tuesday. There you go. Oh, it was 2 days ago. Oh, great.
Oh, I wanted to bump.
Dang, did anybody go?
What is the
Any of your parents? I'll show you a YouTube video after. It's an amazing show. Amazing. All right. You guys tell me, what do I write in there? Because everybody was having trouble.
Negative
Very
6.
good. Right, negative 6. And then negative 2 plus 36 is 34. And now what? Square root both sides. You get x minus 6 equals plus or minus square root 34. There it is.
Sorry, never mind. I didn't see it.
Oh, good. I was like, oh no, I made a mistake. No worries. You have eyes.
Numbers everywhere.
Everybody's good? Too much chat. I know it's a long lesson. Good? I erase. Alright, next slide. I mean, really, that's all there is to it. We could do more examples. Shall we do one more? Let's do one more.
Can we do it on our own?
No, try it on your own. Sure, I'll give you a 30-second head start, and then I'll get
Oh,
started.
30 seconds.
Guys, 30 seconds is forever. That's like 3 TikToks. I'll give you 3 TikToks. Yes? No, I don't.
What?
Why would I lie? I don't have a phone charger. I'm just a humble grade 11 and 12.
I was also trying to become an AP Calc teacher.
Was that 30 seconds?
No.
That was definitely 3 TikToks.
No.
That's okay. If you know what you're doing, great. I'm just gonna get started. So the reciprocal of 3, but I do ask that you don't chatter, okay? So you're working on yours or you're watching me because you're gonna want to check anyways. So because for the benefit of the recording, right? The reciprocal of 3 is a third. Okay, so I'm gonna multiply everything by a third on both sides. Alright, so a third times 3 just gives me 1, so I get x squared. 9 times a third is 3, so you get 3x. And then, look at this, you get 5 thirds. So yeah, sometimes you get some nasty fractions. Now, we're going to move that over there. Alright, so we're completing the square now. There it is. So I'm going to take the b term, which is 3. I'm going to divide it by 2, and I'm going to square it. Now, the intermediate step here is I would just leave it like this. There is no, I can't go 2 into 3. So I'm just going to write 9 over 4. That's what I get when I square it. Let's make that look more like a 4. Get 9 over 4. So I'm going to add 9 over 4 here, and I'm going to add 9 over 4 on that side. Now, this is a perfect square trinomial. It's not obvious, but it is. And here's the nice thing. So if you take that intermediate step, which is this one, and you add it here, I guarantee you that that's going to work. Okay, that's a 3. So you have x plus 3/2 squared equals, over here it's got to do a bit of work. What's our, you guys love this. What's the lowest common denominator? 12. right? Like think of multiples, 3, 6, 9, 12, 4, 8, 12. The lowest one is 12. So this one I multiply by 4 over 4. So I get negative 20 over 12. Plus, this one I need to multiply by 3 over 3. So I get 27 over 12. So I get 7 over 12. So I needed to do that so I could figure out what I write here. Now you can square root both sides, square root the fraction. Here's the good news, you don't need to reduce it. So you just have the plus or minus square root of 7 over 12 equals x plus 3 halves. Move the 3 halves over there. Your final answer is x equals negative 3 halves plus or minus 7 over 12 underneath the square root sign. You're done. Wait, that's kind of an ugly question. No, we're gonna.
We're not gonna waste any more
This video's
time.
never going up because of the massive amount of editing I have to do now. Okay.
Just don't edit it all.
Just leave it as is.
This is where that could be the video that goes viral. Just
None of these videos are going viral.
It'll become viral.
It will. You have to.
Math teacher teaches math. Talks about Snoop Dogg very briefly. Viral video. It's not gonna go viral. Okay. Let me read the question. A football is kicked vertically. Was that up or down? Or sideways?
That's up.
Sideways.
Up.
So here's the ground. After 2 seconds, the formula is okay. So it's kind of like this.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the football. Starts here, flies through the air, hits the ground, and it's modeled by this formula. Okay. When will the football hit the ground? Okay, so it starts here. So how much time goes by? And that's what the t is for. The t is time, and this is the height. I think it explains that in the question. It says that the approximate height, h meters, after t seconds is modeled by that formula. So what does it mean when the football hits the ground? What will the height be? 0, perfect. So now we're solving this equation. There. Can we factor that? Not easily. Now here's the good news, everybody. You can multiply both sides by the reciprocal of this, right? Right, because we're going to end up completing the square. Can't complete the square if the x squared term has a negative 5 in front of it. So I could just divide everything by negative 5, or I could multiply everything by 1 over 5, negative. At the end of the day, you're still going to get the same thing. So divide by negative 5, divide by negative 5, divide by negative 5, divide by negative 5. What do I get? I get 0 equals negative 1/5. What's 20 divided by negative 5? Very good. Negative 4. Negative 5 divided by negative 5 is positive 1. Now I can complete the square. So we kind of have it reversed. How about we write it in the order we're used to it? So we'll write this one first, then the b term. And we'll leave ourselves some space for the magic number we're going to write. Equals, when we move this to the other side, we get 1 over 5 positive, yeah? Wait.
What'd you divide by?
Well, we got to make this positive 1, right? So in the last 2 examples, I showed you we were multiplying by the reciprocal. I'm just showing you don't have to do that. As long as you get rid of whatever this is. So you divide it out. So divide every term by it, you're good. It'll be exactly the same had we multiplied by negative 1 over 5. We would have gotten exactly the same thing. Okay? So take that b term. Divide by 2. Snoop Dogg it. Did anybody catch that?
No.
Yeah.
That's cringe.
So we're going to add 4 to both sides. Now I can factor that. It's going to be t minus whatever is over here in the intermediate step, 2 squared. Get a common denominator, so 1 over 5 plus 20 over 5, right? So you get 21 over 5. This would be a calculator question. Now I'm running out of room, so I'm just going to go over here. I'm going to square root both sides. So I'm going to get t minus 2 equals plus or minus square root of 21 over 5. Add 2 to both sides. Now grab your calculator because we're going to go a step further, right? Because we need to tell them an answer. When will it hit the ground? So we need to know what are the 2 times that we get out of this and interpret the results. So I need your help. Bibbidi bobbidi boo, need your help. That's my Snoop Dogg impression. Anybody? Calculator? Guys, if I get the answer quickly, quicker than you guys, then I have to walk over here, grab the problem. What's that answer you got there, son?
Around 4 meters.
What you got there, Mason?
4.05.
4.04 or 5?
Rounded 5.
5 seconds. What's the other one?
Wait, how did you get it?
We just square rooted it and then added 2.
Was this the plus or minus one? Which one was it?
Where did you get it?
Okay, I guess I'll just do it then. Okay, so yeah, 4.05, I agree. And then we're gonna go 2 minus the square root of 21 over 5. This will be a negative number, yes. The other one is negative 0.049 seconds. I need to interpret this. So can we have a negative time? Does that make sense?
No.
No, it doesn't. That doesn't make sense. So you would say after 4.5 or 4.05 seconds, after the ball's kicked, it will touch the ground. Release the Kraken. Good, I'm gonna stop it there. Thanks for joining us. We have to edit that video. Wow. Bye-bye.